Today I'm going to take pieces of nature, and then I'm going to put those pieces into some dice, and it will be great. So let's mix up some resin and get started. I don't need a lot because I'm just going to be partially filling the molds for now, but I make sure that I mix my resin. I like to pour it in the other cup, mix it in there, and then pour it back into the original cup, mix it in there. Just make sure that I get it mixed really well, 5 minutes, and then pour it into my molds. I'm also going to do some bee dice at the same time, but I'm just going to show the nature dice. I'm using my cap molds with sprues in it, just because it's easier to put things into, and I'm going to fill about a quarter of the way up, just so that there's something for my stuff to float in, essentially. Just giving it a base to set my items on. And once I have that all poured in, I will let it cure in the pressure pot for about 12 hours, and then we'll continue with the others. And we're going to speed through pouring for the bee dice because it's the same principle. Once that is cured, I'm going to take the little drips and clean those off of my mold, and then I'm going to get ready to put my items in using some UV resin to hold it in place. And I just want to use a little bit so that it's not as noticeable inside the die. If it happens to be slightly different color of clear, you'll be able to tell. But just enough to hold it in place while I fill the dice the rest of the way up with resin. And I'm only going to put a little bit on the part that's going to touch the cured resin, which will be face down, which, since my highest number is on the bottom, would actually end up being face up on the actual dice. And I will do that for all of them. And I use my little tweezers to help get my item into the mold, set it in the place where I want it as best I can in the center, before then using the UV light to cure it into place. And then I do a little shake test to make sure that it doesn't come out. While I carefully do the rest, I'd like to take this time to thank you for watching this video, and also give a special shout out and thank you to my patrons. Thank you so much for your support and your awesomeness, really, and your ideas and everything that you do to help me produce these videos. If you would also like to become a patron, please go to patreon.com/geekhappens and sign up for the tier of your choice. Get access to some 3D models and some other goodies, as well as discounts at my store at 3dmtabletop.com, where you can buy dice, have me make some for you, miniatures, DM tools, whatever you need for your Dungeons & Dragons gaming awesomeness. But enough about that, let's continue making these awesome nature dice. But I also need to give a special thank you to my wife for providing these little dried flowers that she dried in sand so that I could use them for this project. I don't have a very steady hand, so sometimes when I try to hold it in place, it doesn't actually work and stay, so I end up having to do it again. It's easiest to be able to put enough on there to where it can sit on its own and then cure it, but whatever works best for you, you guys are more skilled than I am. And now that they are all secure, we can go ahead and mix up some more resin and fill them the rest of the way up. I try to pour fairly slowly off to the side of the item rather than directly on it. I mean, there's no way with the leaf in there. It takes up the whole thing. I have to do it right on it, and there ends up being an air bubble underneath. But I pour off to the side and then let it fill in and fill up. And then like the water drops on a penny to see how many you can get on there, I fill it up over the top of the mold. The flame is optional but helps pop the surface bubbles, and then I'll add some more. The mold that I'm using is one of my original molds that doesn't have a very deep reservoir in it, so a lot of the times it will still have little voids in them because there isn't enough room for the bubbles to come out and the resin to go in. But that's okay, because we can just fix it. The bead ice, if you're wondering, turn out just fine. I made bigger reservoirs for that mold. But I put my lid on and then I gently rock it back and forth and get the resin to come up out of the top. This one has a lot of resin, so there's some that comes out the sides as well, but that's okay. I'm just trying to get as much of the air bubbles out of it before I put it in the pressure pot. Once it's cured, I clean all the resin off of the mold, get the little sprues out with my little clippers to either twist them out or cut it out, whatever works. And then I can open up my lid and take the extra flashing off and pull out my dice. And there wasn't enough resin in the D12 or the D6, so there are little bubble holes that we're going to have to fill later. And they surprisingly did a pretty good job of being right in the center, except for, of course, the little fuzzy guy on the D6. It would have been probably in the middle if I would have put it sideways, but I wanted it to be up and down, and I shouldn't have filled the bottom as much for that one. Didn't plan as well. Oh well. The piece of bark looks very dark, but it is just like a piece of wet wood. Perhaps petrified wood would work better, but I did not have any. Overall, I would say they look really good. Once I get them all out, I cut off the sprues, and then I use a craft knife to get rid of the flashing. And this is why I don't like cap molds with my style of dice, because they leave ugly marks on the flat edges of my dice. And it takes a little bit more craft knifing and sanding, and even then sometimes the marks are still there. But they don't look horrible, and it was much easier to get my items centered and where I wanted them. So, give and take. I then fill in my holes with the UV resin, and then I will cure those in the window for a little bit and with the light. After it's cured, I will use my craft knife again to shave those down before then moving on to sanding. When sanding, I start with the highest grit, which I believe is 30 micron, and then I will sand it until I can't see that sprue mark anymore, and then continue on down to 1 micron until I get that glass-like finish. Aw yeah. And then I do that to all of them. And then I also do that to each of the edges. That had flashing anyway. And then after that's all sanded and looks great, I'll do some paint. And I like to have some accented colors, so I do the highest number of the dice a slightly different color, but still trying to match the color of what's inside. And I'll do that with all of those, put some paint in the number, wipe it off with a damp cloth, and do that for every number on all of the dice. And if for some reason it doesn't quite wipe off, I'll use the wet polish of the 1 micron and basically wipe off the excess with it. And it looks really good. And for the sake of time, the rest will just be magically painted instantly. And now we have some very pretty nature dice for our druid, or just someone who loves nature. And I think the colors actually matched quite well. I don't have very many colors of paint, but the ones that I used look great. Well, I hope this video has been helpful to you, or at least entertaining. If you like it, make sure to click that thumbs up button, and go ahead and subscribe to see any future videos. Maybe make a comment on any dice you would like me to make in the future. And thank you for watching.